Can a single cookie and a kind note be enough to change an entire corporation? And what will happen when the very CEO of that company has to go undercover to rediscover the soul it has lost? Ethan Ward stood silently in front of the large mirror, bathed in the warm, golden light of the room, his deep brown eyes reflecting the image of a man who felt like a stranger to himself. The expensive gray suit had been replaced with an old navy windbreaker, faded jeans, and worn-out sneakers that hadn't been touched in years. His black hair, usually cut neatly, had been dyed a shade darker, and with a simple pair of plastic-framed glasses, Ethan now looked like an ordinary office worker from the suburbs. To anyone else, this might have seemed like a minor change, but to Ethan, the 42-year-old CEO of Firestone Pizza, the fastest-growing pizza brand in America for the past 5 years, this was a bold and risky decision. The last time he appeared in public, it had been on a nationally broadcast interview, the image of a successful businessman with a confident smile and sharp answers. But tonight, staring into the mirror, Ethan no longer saw that powerful CEO. He only saw a man desperately trying to find the lost soul of the creation he had poured his youth into. He sighed, resting his hand on the wooden desk where a thick stack of reports lay waiting. The numbers looked as impressive as ever. This quarter's revenue was up 12%. Operational costs optimized 7% better than last year, and investors were more pleased than ever. Yet those very numbers were the reason he couldn't sleep at night. Ethan had once believed that numbers never lied, that as long as growth continued, his company would run smoothly like a perfectly oiled machine. But for months now, letters of complaint sent directly to him, letters the communications department tried to bury, had revealed a different picture. Pizzas arriving late, staff behaving rudely, customers complaining about cold, indifferent service instead of the warm smiles that had once been Firestone Pizza's signature. Some branches were even criticized as fast but soulless, just getting the job done instead of serving people. And what worried Ethan the most were the rumors about irresponsible management at certain stores, where new employees were left to fend for themselves, and veteran staff had lost all passion. He remembered vividly the early days when Firestone Pizza was just a small shop on a corner in Brooklyn. Ethan had stayed in the kitchen until midnight, kneading dough while listening carefully to every customer's feedback. Back then, every pizza wasn't just a product, it carried a piece of his heart. He remembered the bright smile of a little boy receiving an extra slice of cheese pizza for free, the tears of a middle-aged woman to whom he gave a complimentary meal after learning she had just lost her husband. But now, those memories seemed buried under revenue targets, tense meetings, and flashy marketing strategies. Ethan wondered if Firestone Pizza still held the soul he had once poured into it, or if it had become nothing more than a massive machine driven purely by profit. Last night he had sat alone in his office, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating his laptop screen as he read through quality control reports again and again. Everything was presented flawlessly, too flawlessly. That very perfection made him suspicious. He no longer trusted what his subordinates reported. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes. The decision to go undercover didn't come from impulse. It was an instinct, the instinct of a founder trying to protect his creation from decay. Ethan closed his suitcase, placing inside it a second phone without any company-related apps, along with a simple wallet holding a few bills. He had prepared an entire new identity. Nick Barrett, an office worker from the suburbs who preferred gluten-free pizza and often ordered late at night after work. He would start at branch 14, the one with the most complaints about customer service. The plan was simple: place an order during the weekend rush, make a few special requests, and then quietly observe everything. He wasn't looking for praise or deference. He just wanted to know how Firestone Pizza truly treated its ordinary customers. Before leaving, Ethan looked into the mirror one last time. His eyes no longer held the usual pride of a successful CEO, but rather the calm resolve of a man stepping into a silent battle. A battle not to save revenue, but to save the very soul of Firestone Pizza, a soul he had almost lost in his relentless pursuit of numbers. And tonight, In the bustling chaos of a kitchen filled with the smell of cheese and tomato sauce, Ethan Ward would no longer be the powerful CEO. He would simply be an ordinary customer, waiting for a pizza, but in truth, waiting to find the lost faith he once had in himself. The wall clock in the kitchen ticked steadily, but no one at Firestone Pizza Branch 14 seemed to care. Time here felt like an enemy everyone was trying to push away as quickly as possible, not to do their job better, but just to escape their shift. When Ethan, disguised as Nick Barrett, stepped through the glass door smudged with fingerprints, he immediately sensed something was wrong. There was no cheerful greeting, none of the friendly energy that had once defined the Firestone Pizza brand. Instead, there were curt conversations, averted glances, and the weary sighs of a few young employees. Harsh white light from fluorescent bulbs revealed greasy stains on the kitchen floor. At the order counter, a staff member leaned lazily against it, eyes fixed on their phone, scrolling far faster than they served customers. Ethan chose a seat in a secluded corner where he could see the entire kitchen area, his eyes tracking every detail like a detective. At the kitchen station, Todd Mason, the branch manager, appeared with a swaggering gait. Around 30, with a trendy haircut that looked forced and an arrogance that couldn't be hidden, Todd smirked as he barked out instructions. "Go easy on the sauce, don't waste it. Customers are eating pizza, not fine art." A young employee, halfway through sprinkling cheese, froze for a moment, then nodded reluctantly and skipped steps he knew were part of the standard procedure. Ethan understood immediately this behavior wasn't random. As Todd walked past the screen displaying orders, he snorted, "Gluten-free, extra cheese, extra wings. Oh, great, another picky old guy. Just throw it together, don't waste time." Laughter erupted from two other employees. No one protested, not because they agreed, but because they knew arguing with Todd meant trouble. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He remembered clearly the principle he had set when founding Firestone Pizza. Every pizza had to be prepared as if it were for the most important person in the world. Yet here, a young worker sprinkled cheese carelessly, another practically tossed a sauce container onto the counter, and the prep station reeked of burnt crust and stale oil. Ethan kept his face calm, but under the table, his hand clenched into a fist. Near the cashier, a young customer ordered a drink refill. The cashier, without even looking, tossed a paper cup onto the counter instead of handing it politely. The customer frowned but said nothing. Scenes like this had likely become so common that no one bothered to complain anymore. To Ethan, that was more alarming than public complaints because it meant poor service had become normal in a place that once prided itself on kindness. Todd dropped into a chair against the wall, scrolling on his phone while barking orders. "Move faster! Stop staring at the pizza! Customers don't care if it's pretty, they just need to eat it." A worker trying to spread cheese evenly received a sharp glare. "What are you doing? This isn't MasterChef." Laughter broke out again from two girls stacking pizza boxes, their eyes betraying a mix of fear and resignation. Sitting in his corner, Ethan felt every word like a blade cutting through his convictions. He remembered those early nights when he personally stood in the kitchen, carefully adjusting each slice of cheese to give customers the perfect experience. Now, in this branch, that spirit was gone, replaced by apathy. There was no doubt left. Those flawless reports were just a facade hiding a workplace culture that was rotting from within. And then, when the screen flashed with the Nick Barrett order, Todd pointed toward the kitchen, his mocking tone echoing through the room. "Here, the weirdest order of the night. Make it quick. Don't bother doing it right. People like this just like to nitpick, but they won't find anything worth nitpicking anyway." Laughter followed again, this time tinged with open ridicule. Ethan narrowed his eyes, every word landing like a silent challenge. He knew that to truly understand how far Firestone Pizza had strayed from its roots, he would have to dig deeper, into places no report would ever reach. The back door of the kitchen swung open, letting in a rush of cold night air that made the transparent plastic curtain flutter. Gary Holden walked in with slow, steady steps, his shoulders slightly hunched from age. He wore a faded delivery uniform, the collar edges slightly frayed, but it was neatly pressed with care. A few dry mud stains clung to his worn shoes, proof that he had just returned from a long delivery. His face bore deep lines, and his graying hair was damp with sweat, but his eyes still held a brightness, a spark of dedication Ethan hadn't seen in any other employee for a long time, the kind of commitment that asked for no recognition. "Gary, we've got a long-distance order, gluten-free, a pain to deal with. Can you handle it?" Todd's voice carried a hint of mockery. A young employee standing nearby muttered just loud enough for Ethan to catch, "Don't get why he's still working here. Must really need the money." Todd smirked, not bothering to deny it. Yeah, who else works at his age unless they're desperate? Maybe he's trying to prove something, or he just doesn't understand what retirement means. Gary clearly heard, or at least knew they were talking about him, but he didn't respond. He simply nodded, his deep voice calm and steady. "Sure, just give me the address." Without hesitation, he picked up the delivery bag, set it on the counter, and began inspecting each item with meticulous care. From his corner, Ethan noticed how, while others worked with careless haste, Gary handled each box as if he were preparing a meal for someone he cared about. He opened the pizza box, checked that the cheese hadn't shifted, and gently adjusted a few slices of mushroom that had slid to one side. With the box of chicken wings, he used a napkin to wipe the sauce smeared on the rim so it looked neat. It was such a small thing, but those little details had once been the pride Ethan instilled in every employee during Firestone Pizza's early days. Before closing the delivery bag, Gary reached into his old backpack and pulled out a small plastic pouch. Inside was a homemade cookie wrapped carefully in cling film tied with a simple rubber band. He added a handwritten note, the letters neat and deliberate. "Thank you for ordering. Wishing you a warm and happy evening." Ethan could see each letter clearly as Gary tucked the note into the bag. Gary hadn't told anyone about this habit, and no one in the store seemed to notice. "What are you doing?" a young girl at the counter asked, her tone half curious, half teasing. Gary looked up and smiled gently. "Just a habit. A little note might make someone's day better." Todd passed by, glancing over with a mocking chuckle. "Nobody cares, Gary. People just want hot, cheap pizza. Don't waste your time." Gary didn't reply, only nodded and continued placing each item into the insulated bag, making sure nothing would shift during delivery. Ethan watched it all, a tightness forming in his chest. While Todd and the others rushed through orders to save seconds, Gary, the man they mocked for his age, was the only one still taking pride in his work. The warm yellow kitchen light reflected off Gary's lined face, making him look like a living reminder of what Firestone Pizza had once stood for. Simple, genuine kindness, without expecting anything in return. Todd passed by again, his voice sharp with annoyance. "Hurry up, Gary, this isn't Christmas dinner. We don't have time for sentimental nonsense." Gary kept his small smile, his tone calm. "I'm not taking much time, Todd. It's just, if you're going to do something, do it right." The room fell silent for a second before Todd's scoff filled it again. But Ethan heard every word, and those words struck him like a painful reminder. When Gary finally lifted the delivery bag, his slightly hunched figure and slow steps betrayed the aches in his knees. Yet the way he held that insulated bag made Ethan feel as if Gary were carrying a precious gift, not just another delivery. And in that moment, Ethan understood that this undercover investigation wasn't just about finding problems. It was about rediscovering the true soul of Firestone Pizza, a soul that still existed, but only within the heart of an aging man named Gary Holden. The air outside Ethan's temporary rental house was so still you could hear the faint chirping of insects in the bushes along the roadside. The soft yellow glow of a street lamp reflected on the dew-covered pavement, creating shimmering streaks of light. The clock on Ethan's phone read 8:27 p.m., just minutes before the scheduled delivery. He sat in an old armchair near the window, eyes fixed on the porch light flickering in the breeze. His heart beat faster than usual, not from excitement over the pizza he ordered, but from something deeper, a vague yet insistent feeling, as if he was about to witness a truth he had forgotten for far too long. A distant engine hum broke the quiet, growing closer until a beige sedan, worn with age, pulled up in front of the house. The headlights flickered, one dimmer than the other, and a long scratch stretched across the front bumper. The car door opened, and Gary Holden stepped out. Under the muted streetlight, he appeared tall but slightly hunched, his shoulders stiff as if carrying a lingering ache. Yet every move he made spoke of care and patience, from adjusting the strap of the insulated delivery bag to quickly checking his shoe soles to avoid tracking dirt inside. Gary opened the car's back door, lifting the bag with both hands as if cradling something precious. He adjusted the straps, gave the top a gentle tap to ensure everything was secured. Ethan watched in silence, realizing he wasn't looking at just a delivery driver doing his job, but at a man pouring his heart into the smallest details. The door swung open before Gary could knock. Ethan stepped out, playing the part of an ordinary customer. Gary looked slightly surprised, but immediately offered a warm smile, his brown eyes radiating a quiet kindness that made you feel welcomed. "Good evening, sir," Gary said, his voice low and slightly raspy but courteous. "One gluten-free pizza with extra cheese, chicken wings, and a soda. I hope it's exactly how you wanted it." Ethan nodded slowly, his voice catching slightly. "Perfect." Gary carefully removed each item from the insulated bag, handing them over with both hands as if presenting a gift. "I always try to keep everything as warm as possible, especially on chilly nights like this," he said before pulling out a small package wrapped in cling film, tied with a simple rubber band. "And this," he added with a modest smile, "is just a personal habit, not company policy. A cookie I made myself, for my granddaughter's recipe. If you're not allergic to peanuts, I hope you'll enjoy it. She told me to give one to every new customer." Ethan stared at the little cookie, a wave of unspoken emotions rising within him. He unfolded the handwritten note that came with it, the letters neat and round, carefully written. "Thank you for your order. Wishing you a warm and happy evening." In that instant, Ethan was transported back to Firestone Pizza's earliest days, when he wrote personal thank you notes to customers and stayed up all night to make sure every order was perfect. He looked up at Gary, his voice softer, as if he wanted to hear more of the story behind this simple gesture. "Have you been doing this for long?" Gary chuckled gently, not boastful but with a humble honesty. "Much longer than I planned. I retired early after working at the post office, but life changes." A brief shadow of sadness crossed his eyes before he replaced it with a soft smile. "My daughter passed away a few years ago, and I've been raising my granddaughter since. She's my whole world now. I need this job to take care of her, and honestly, it keeps me from being stuck in too much grief. To be truthful, this job lets me meet people, and I think even when it's just delivering pizza, a little kindness can make someone's day better, don't you think?" Ethan couldn't answer right away. In that moment, he wasn't a CEO conducting an undercover investigation, but simply a man being reminded of values he had nearly lost. His gaze softened, his throat tightening with an unfamiliar ache. Gary nodded slightly, his tone gentle, almost like a blessing. "Enjoy your meal, sir. Thank you for ordering, and have a good evening." As Gary turned and walked away, his silhouette stretched long across the damp pavement under the flickering streetlight. Ethan stood at the door, holding the small cookie and handwritten note. In the quiet of that night, with the smell of hot cheese drifting from the pizza box, he felt something he hadn't found in years of board meetings or revenue reports, a simple kindness powerful enough to change everything. Ethan walked back inside slowly, placing the pizza bag on the table but leaving it unopened. He sat down, staring at the note again. "A little kindness can make someone's day better." Gary's words echoed in his mind, repeating like a quiet reminder. And he knew this was only the beginning of a long night that would change his life and the future of Firestone Pizza forever. Nearly half an hour after Gary left, Ethan remained seated motionless in the armchair, absent-mindedly turning the half-unwrapped cookie in his hands, though he hadn't taken a bite. Gary's warm words echoed in his mind, louder than any financial report he had ever read. Even just delivering pizza, a little kindness can make someone's day better. His eyes drifted to the window, and through the glass fogged with night dew, he saw Gary's old beige sedan parked at a small gas station not far from the house. The flickering neon lights cast soft glimmers on his figure, making him look both weary and steadfast. Ethan grabbed his jacket, his mind telling him this was not the time to interfere, that he needed to keep his identity secret to complete his undercover investigation, but his heart didn't listen. Gary's car was parked at the farthest corner of the gas station near an old fuel pump. He stood beside it, one hand resting lightly on the hood, the other holding the pump handle. The yellow glow of the gas station lights revealed every deep line on his face, highlighting the wrinkles near his eyes. He looked tired, but a small smile lingered as he glanced at the back seat where a worn stuffed animal sat neatly, no doubt belonging to his granddaughter. Ethan approached slowly, his voice breaking the quiet before Gary even turned around. "Mr. Holden." Gary turned, slightly frowning in surprise, though his kind smile remained. "Ah, the gluten-free customer from earlier. Was there a problem with the order?" "I'm sorry if—" Ethan shook his head, cutting him off with a calm yet slightly emotional tone. "No, Gary, everything was perfect. Better than I ever expected." He took a deep breath, meeting the man's honest gaze, and spoke slowly. "I'm not Nick Barrett. My real name is Ethan Ward. I'm the CEO of Firestone Pizza." For a moment, the wind gusted, scattering a few receipts from Gary's hand. He froze, eyes widening as his smile faded into shock. You're who?" His voice trembled, disbelief written all over his face. Ethan nodded, pulling an ID from his jacket pocket and holding it out. "Yes, I built Firestone Pizza, but tonight I didn't come here as a CEO. I came to see how my company truly treats its customers." Gary stared at the ID, then back at Ethan, his expression a mix of astonishment and worry. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. Did I do something wrong? Was the order cold? Ethan stepped closer, cutting him off, his voice firm but gentle. "No, Gary. You did everything right. More right than anyone else here. You reminded me why I started this company. You reminded me that Firestone Pizza was built on something real kindness and pride in every pizza we make." Gary stood silent, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from emotion. He looked away briefly, trying to contain a sigh, as if such praise was something he wasn't used to hearing. I'm just doing my job," he said softly, a slow smile returning to his face, warm and genuine. "A little kindness doesn't cost much, and if it makes someone happier, then it's worth it." Ethan studied him for a long moment, as if committing every wrinkle, every steadfast glance to memory. In that moment, he wasn't a successful CEO, but a man relearning his first lesson in humanity. The night wind carried the faint smell of gasoline mixed with the warmth of the paper coffee cup Gary had left on the car hood. Ethan finally spoke, his voice quiet but full of resolve. "Gary, I won't let what you do be forgotten. You've taught me a lesson more valuable than any board meeting I've ever sat through, and I promise I will change everything." Gary simply nodded, his gentle smile unwavering. The neon gas station light flickered, illuminating two men, one older, one younger, standing side by side in the night, connected not by contracts or titles, but by genuine respect between two hearts that valued people over profit. Ethan turned to leave, but before opening his car door, he looked back at Gary one last time and said, "Like a vow, we will meet again, but next time, I won't just be a customer." The next morning, the headquarters of Firestone Pizza gleamed under the sunlight, its massive glass panels reflecting the clear blue sky. On a normal day, the atmosphere here would be lively and confident. But today, as Ethan Ward stepped into the company's largest conference room, a strange heaviness seemed to settle over everyone. He wore a simpler suit than usual, leaving behind the expensive tie, his expression serious but his eyes softer than the cold sharpness they were known for. Regional directors, department heads, and several senior managers were already seated, their faces tense as they realized Ethan had called an emergency meeting without going through the usual scheduling procedures. The conference room was bathed in white light, the large central screen still in standby mode. Ethan stood at the head of the table, placing both hands on the polished wooden surface, his gaze sweeping slowly across every face. He drew in a steady breath before speaking, his voice calm yet commanding enough to make the entire room fall silent. Last night, I visited one of our branches, not as a CEO, but as an ordinary customer, and I saw something that none of your pristine reports could ever show me. He signaled for his assistant to play the hidden camera footage recorded by a team posing as a documentary crew. On the screen, images from the kitchen appeared. Todd Mason with his smug expression, his sarcastic and condescending comments, young employees working carelessly, and finally Gary Holden, his aging frame carefully inspecting each pizza box, gently placing a homemade cookie inside along with a neatly handwritten note. The room stayed silent as Todd's mocking words echoed through the speakers. "No one cares, Gary. People just want hot and cheap pizza." And then Gary's warm, steady voice, quiet yet undeniable. "If you're going to do something, do it right." When the video ended, no one spoke. A few managers lowered their heads while others avoided Ethan's gaze. Standing tall, his voice steady, Ethan said firmly, "You all saw it. Gary Holden, an older delivery driver doing a job many would consider insignificant, reminded me of what Firestone Pizza used to stand for. And you also saw what Todd Mason and a few others are turning this company into." He paused, his eyes locking onto the regional directors, his tone lowering but carrying even more weight. "We've let numbers blind us. We've forgotten that customers don't just buy pizza. They buy an experience. They buy respect. And if we continue like this, Firestone Pizza will no longer be Firestone Pizza." A regional director shifted as if to speak, but Ethan's sharp gaze made him immediately stay silent. Ethan continued, his tone softening slightly but remaining firm. "I didn't call you here to assign blame. I called you here to change things. Starting today, Firestone Pizza will launch a new program, the Hearts of Firestone. Every month, each branch must honor one employee who not only does their job well but shows genuine care for customers. Stories like Gary Holden's will be shared at every meeting, in every internal bulletin. I want every employee to understand that kindness isn't optional. It's the soul of this company." A hand rose, belonging to the head of human resources, someone who rarely spoke in tense meetings. "And what about Todd Mason and other managers like him, sir?" Ethan looked directly at her, his eyes unwavering. "Anyone who disrespects customers, anyone who turns their work into a series of lifeless motions, has no place here. Start with Todd Mason. As of today, he no longer works for Firestone Pizza." A murmur rippled through the room, but no one protested. Ethan leaned back slightly, his voice now calmer but carrying a sense of resolve. "I don't want Firestone Pizza to just be a big name with huge profits. I want it to be a place where customers smile when they receive their pizza and employees smile when they place every slice of cheese. Gary Holden has done that, and I want the entire system to follow his example." His gaze swept across the room, no longer cold but filled with determination and belief. He ended the meeting with a single sentence that left the room in complete silence. "We don't just sell pizza, we deliver warmth. If anyone doesn't believe in that, they don't need to sit here." As Ethan left the conference room, those remaining exchanged glances, some sighed, some pressed their lips together, but in their eyes, a change had already begun. A week after the historic meeting at Firestone Pizza's headquarters, the atmosphere inside the building had completely changed. Instead of conversations about revenue figures or the latest marketing campaigns, today everyone was talking about one name, Gary Holden. And there he was, the man who had quietly worked for years, now standing nervously in front of the building's grand glass entrance. Gary wore a light blue shirt that had been ironed so perfectly you could see every crisp fold. His collar was neatly buttoned as if he were preparing for a formal ceremony. He tugged slightly at his sleeve, glancing down at his old shoes, which had been polished until they looked almost new. Beside him stood a young girl with neatly tied soft brown hair and clear eyes that sparkled with excitement and emotion, Emily Holden, his granddaughter. She held her grandfather's hand tightly and whispered, her voice soft but full of conviction. "Grandpa, you look so handsome. I'm sure they're going to love you." Gary gave a small, modest smile, warm but tinged with unease. I'm just a delivery man, Emily. I'm sure they're only doing this to say thank you." But Gary was wrong. Inside the grand lobby, dozens of employees from various branches, senior managers, and regional directors had gathered. They weren't there for some polite formality. They were there because they wanted to meet the man whose actions in a simple video had moved them to tears. As Gary stepped inside, a wave of applause erupted. He froze, eyes widening in shock. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially when every gaze was filled with genuine admiration. Emily squeezed his hand and whispered, "You deserve this, Grandpa." At the far end of the lobby, Ethan Ward stood waiting, no longer wearing the cold, intimidating expression of a CEO. He stepped forward, his smile warm, and his eyes filled with heartfelt emotion. "Gary," he called, his voice clear in the silent room, "I told you we'd meet again, and this time, not as a customer. Today, I'm not here as a CEO, but as someone deeply grateful." At his signal, a large red cloth behind him was pulled down, revealing a brand new delivery van, pristine white with the Firestone Pizza logo printed boldly. And on the back door, in bright, simple lettering, were the words, "Thank you, Gary." Gary's eyes widened, his hands trembling slightly. Ethan continued, his voice steady, carrying across the room. "This van belongs to you, Gary. It will have lifetime maintenance and all insurance costs will be covered by the company. I want you to continue doing the work you love without ever worrying about anything again." Gary opened his mouth to speak, but Ethan raised a hand gently, signaling him to let him finish. "But that's not all. I know you've worked tirelessly not for yourself, but for Emily. A grandfather who sacrifices like that deserves our support. Starting today, Firestone Pizza will cover Emily's entire college tuition any school she chooses. I want her dreams to be built on the same kindness you've shown every day." The lobby filled with cheers and applause mixed with excited shouts. Emily lifted her hands to her mouth, her eyes glistening before tears spilled freely. She turned and threw her arms around her grandfather, her voice breaking. "Grandpa, you did something no one else could. They truly see you." Gary stood frozen for a moment, as if the reality before him was too overwhelming to process. Then he turned to Ethan, extending his trembling hand. But instead of a handshake, Ethan stepped forward and embraced him tightly in front of everyone. "Thank you, Gary," Ethan said, his voice lower now, filled with quiet sincerity, "for reminding me why I started all of this. And thank you for doing the right thing, even when no one was watching." Gary squeezed Ethan's shoulder gently, his smile calm and warm, his eyes reflecting a simple but profound pride. "I was only doing my job, Ethan, but thank you for seeing me." 3 months had passed since the day Gary Holden was honored at the Firestone Pizza headquarters, yet the impact of that day didn't stop at a single emotional ceremony. It spread through the system like a quiet but powerful wave, changing how everyone looked at a job once thought to be simple. In every branch, new posters were pinned to the walls with a bold message: "We don't just sell pizza, we deliver warmth." Beneath the words was a picture of Gary smiling gently, holding his delivery bag like a living symbol of the company's renewed philosophy. At morning meetings, managers began telling employees Gary's story, how he carefully adjusted every slice of cheese, how he baked homemade cookies just to bring a smile to a customer's face. These stories were no longer hollow slogans but had become a standard. New employees listened to Gary's story like they were hearing a legend. A young intern at Branch 23 even bought a notebook to write down every touching story customers shared, saying he wanted to become the next Gary of Firestone Pizza. Ethan Ward was a completely different man now. No longer was he the CEO locked in his office staring at cold statistics. Every month he spent a week visiting different branches without notice and without any ceremonial welcome. He sat with kitchen staff, asking them about special customers, listening to even the smallest struggles he used to overlook. Ethan also launched a new program called Names Not to Be Forgotten. Every month, employees from all branches could nominate colleagues they felt were inspiring. Ethan personally wrote their names by hand in a letter and had their photos displayed in every branch. As for Gary Holden, the man who had sparked all these changes, he had finally retired from delivery work. But he didn't leave Firestone Pizza. Ethan invited him to become the cultural ambassador, a part-time role with a flexible schedule. Gary traveled to different branches, shaking hands with employees, sharing his story, and even bringing along Emily's homemade cookies to give to those he saw working with true heart. Every time Gary walked into a branch, the atmosphere shifted. People worked more carefully, more thoughtfully, not out of fear, but because they wanted to be like him. Emily began a new chapter of her own. That autumn, she officially stepped onto a college campus with a full scholarship funded by Firestone Pizza. On her first day, she called her grandfather, her voice full of emotion. "Grandpa, I'm going to study education. I want to inspire people because you taught me that small things can change the world." Gary stood by the window watching yellow leaves fall outside, his eyes glistening. "I'm proud of you, Emily. Go and do the right thing just like we always have." Meanwhile, one late evening, Ethan sat alone in his office, holding the same cookie Gary had once given him. The soft golden desk lamp cast a warm glow across his face, no longer the tense expression of a corporate executive, but the calm of a man who had found himself again. He thought of the early days, of the cramped pizza kitchen where he had once made every pie by hand. Now he no longer feared that Firestone Pizza would become a soulless machine, because he had found its heart again in Gary's dedication, in Emily's belief, and in every employee who smiled as they handed over a steaming hot pizza. Firestone Pizza had changed, not because of an expensive marketing campaign, but because of a simple lesson from an old man with a kind smile. And Ethan knew that was the true legacy, a legacy written by kindness, passed from one heart to another, one pizza box at a time. In business, people often believe that success comes from numbers, but the truth is that it is the little things that keep the soul of a brand alive, a genuine smile, a handwritten thank you note, or simply the way we treat customers as real human beings. The lesson from Gary Holden shows that sometimes quiet kindness can be more powerful than any strategy. If you believe that simple things can change the world, hit like to help spread this story, subscribe so you don't miss other meaningful lessons, and comment right below the video with the 3 words, "Keep kindness," because that is the most lasting value we can give to one another.